Hey everyone, welcome to another Screenwriting Tips. My name is Tony D, and today we're talking about action movies. And at the end of this video, I'm going to talk about my prediction for the Captain Marvel movie, because I need to get my prediction in before I go see it for you and tell you all about it. Okay, so action movies. All right. The action in an action movie is to that kind of movie what comedy is to a comedy movie, what romance is to a romance movie, what sex is to a porn movie. It is the focus. Now, that doesn't mean it can't be a well-written movie, and you as a screenwriter need to acknowledge that, but you also kind of got to acknowledge that since it's such an action movie, typically the stars of like hardcore action movies, like real action movies, like Jackie Chan style fighting type movies, or The Raid. The Raid was awesome, by the way. The Raid movies, if you haven't seen them, see them. They tend to star guys who are at their peak physical condition. They're martial arts guys, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and these kinds of guys. They're not the greatest actors in the world. So the first thing you have to kind of acknowledge when you're setting out to write these is you can't put a lot of tough acting scenes in for the lead, because typically the lead is an action guy first and an actor second. So keep that in mind. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have a good movie that's well acted. You just have to scale back the acting, because the risk you run into is kind of what would happen in an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie back in the day. Arnold Schwarzenegger, could only act so much in the early days. I mean, he just was stoic, and he had a thick accent, and his movies were a hit, not because you were super convinced of his acting, but just because he killed a bunch of guys and it was cool. And I think there's a difference between the fighting action movies, which the lead does a ton of fighting, and the movies where there are tons of stunts, but it's not necessarily fighting, or it's not necessarily done by the lead. So I think the Jackie Chan movies, where Jackie does all his own stunts, are a little different from like an Arnold movie, or like a movie like Hooper, which is a great movie, by the way. Definitely heavy on stunts. It's about stuntmen, and although it's more of a comedy movie and a drama than it is an action movie, despite the fact it's just full of stunts. I mean, it's an awesome movie. It's not as action-packed as, say, a Jackie Chan movie, where the action in that movie is in the forefront of everything. And just like any other movie, you have to keep heightening the action. So the biggest action scenes go in the third act. You should have some decent ones in the second act, and the first act is mostly setup. You definitely want to have a little action to kind of grease the wheels, kind of let the audience know what's coming, maybe a little foreshadowing. Maybe in the first act, the main character loses a couple of battles, maybe he loses early in the second act, but by the end of the second, third acts, your protagonist should probably be winning, and should probably win, depending on the movie. Kind of like in a sex movie, a porno movie, the action is what people are there to see. Just like people watch porno for the sex. They don't watch it for the story. Again, it doesn't mean the action movie can't have a good story, but just understand that, a movie like the Steven Seagal movies. Steven Seagal at one point, and this is what I heard, so whatever, Seagal supposedly in his contract for every movie he made, There had to be like so many scenes of him fighting. He had to kick a guy in the face or something like that. Like literally all the major scenes of a Steven Seagal movie were in his contract, and the distributor insisted on those being in every movie he shot for, you know, this contract I heard about him signing. And it'd always be a beautiful woman and, you know, that kind of thing. So these action movies are, first off, they're extremely lucrative. They translate very well overseas. So, you know, almost every culture will love to watch action. Obviously, the Hong Kong movies, Hong Kong action movies, people in Asia love it. They love those kinds of movies. They love it in India. A lot of their movies are a lot of the Bollywood movies are very heavily action oriented. They have a slightly different tone. They tend to be a little more campy and super unrealistic. The Asian stuff tends to be, you know, gritty, and when I say Asian, I mean more like Chinese, Japanese, Korean. That stuff tends to be a little more gangster oriented, a little more gritty, a little more kung fu, real martial arts. The Bollywood stuff tends to be just a little bit crazy. I saw a clip of a movie or a gif of one of the Bollywood movies. It was really crazy. It was the main character was like lounging on top of a car as it like spun around, and then he got up and whipped out a gun and shot all these guys. I mean, it was just nuts. And like obviously it was very, very fake. Whereas, you know, in a Jackie Chan movie, Jackie's actually doing the stunts, and there's really nothing fake about it in terms of the stunts, right? So little differences there. The American action movies, you know, they tend to be, well, you know, most American movies are spectacles because Hollywood, that's what we export. We export these giant spectacles, and we spend hundreds of millions of dollars on films here, and that is very appealing to the other markets overseas. Typically, movies in other countries, if they're financed in other countries, don't have that kind of spectacle. Now, the Bollywood guys are kind of an exception, but I don't think they have although they're getting there, but they don't really have the cachet that Hollywood does, or I don't think they have the money quite. Although I'm sure there's been a few Bollywood movies that are pretty up there. But you know, typically they look to America for these big giant films. You know, I was shocked to find when I went up to Canada that the highest grossing movie there had only grossed like, I think it was like something like $30 million or something. You know, and at the time it was Good Cop, Bad Cop, because it was Good Cop, Bad Cop, but the other cop was like from Montreal, so he was a little French. So, and you know, it's an okay movie. I watched it, but you know, it's very Canadian. It was made in Canada, but you would watch that film here and go, well, is it a low budget movie? I mean, it was, you know, it wasn't poorly made or anything, but it was just, it felt very sort of low key. But it was one of the highest grossing Canadian movie released in Canada. I don't think it got a release here. So it's interesting to see movies in other countries. Really big budget European movies, they're almost non-existent. One of the big budget European movies that was supposed to happen was the Terry Gilliam Don Quixote movie starring Johnny Depp. That was financed, from what I understand, strictly by Europeans originally. And I thought there was rumors that it might eventually come out someday, but not with Johnny Depp, or maybe it did. I don't remember. But I know that originally when the whole thing kind of fell apart, you know, the funding kind of fell through. That can happen in a movie, by the way. You know, sometimes they're shooting movies and halfway through they just pull the plug and it's over and the investors leave and they just decide it's a big write-off. And there could be a lot of reasons for that. Some of them may not have anything to do with the movie. I knew a guy who had a comic book deal with a investor, and the investor pulled the plug on the comic when they didn't get enough orders. And it was, towards the end of the year, and he basically wanted a big tax write-off, and so that's what he used it for. And the comic never came out. It was a shame. The guy worked on it very hard. So the same thing can happen in a movie. The investors can get cold feet. You've only spent $500,000, but we're pulling the plug. It kind of depends upon the contract, Obviously, certain people on the movie would probably have guarantees of payment regardless, especially the star of the movie. If you have a big star, they're not going to care that you canceled the movie. They're going to expect to be paid. But their contract may not have that, or you may have a clause in the contract that says you don't get paid for any work you don't do. I mean, anything is possible in the world of movies. So, anyhow, getting back to the whole action thing. Again, you want to build up the action, and part of the challenge of doing an action movie, and I've done, let's see, at least one. Yeah, one movie I would consider an action movie. It's a bit of a cross-genre thing, but it definitely had a lot of action. I mean, there was definitely a lot of kung fu in it. I didn't get too wrapped around the axle describing the fights. I mean, I like to describe fights in my work, but, I'm not... I took martial arts, but I wouldn't call myself a martial artist. I don't know enough about it to really get into, mapping out every swing and blow that the characters exchange. I don't really know if that would be useful, much like a cinematographer and a director have to decide upon the shots and how the movie would look, and you should only put what you need to put in the script and not every single detail. Same thing goes for a stunt coordinator. A stunt coordinator is going to have his own ideas how things play out, and he may have to change things due to pragmatic concerns, due to safety concerns. That's a big issue in stunts. I mean, that's really what a stunt coordinator's job is, to make sure the stunt people don't get hurt. I mean, that's priority number one. You don't want anybody hurt on a movie. That's going to really make the investors nervous. Anything that could, kill a movie faster if somebody gets severely injured or killed on a movie. And that's happened. Stunt people have died on a movie. I know that a stunt person got really hurt or possibly died on that Eddie Murphy vampire movie. Certainly the Twilight Zone movie, Vic Morrow, died with the helicopter crash. And I think there was another actor who also died. There have been accidents where people got really hurt, especially stunt people. And in these big Hollywood productions, a lot of times you have body doubles for everybody, and that's so it sounds, a bit, what's the word I'm looking for? It sounds like they're wasting a lot of money having a body double, but it actually helps because the actual actor is in his trailer or in makeup. Maybe he's going over lines, maybe he's running lines with his fellow cast members, or maybe he's just getting in the mindset to act and staying well rested, because on camera you really got to be up, you got to be ready to go, you got to have a great performance, so you don't want to wear out your actor just standing around while you're moving the damn lights. So the double is really there, so the director and the cinematographer and all the people who do the production end can light the damn thing, against a guy who really looks like the actor. And they may even, take photos and whatnot just to sort of see where things are. And also, that body double may also be a stunt person. It also may be a person who fills in for the kind of shot where you don't really see the actor, maybe just see their shoulder, maybe just see an arm, maybe even see like the outline, but it's not them. But the double looks enough like them that you'll never notice the difference when they cut it all together. So, the body double can save the actors wear and tear mentally, physically, and, it can make, from that standpoint, it makes the production more efficient, right? You're not wearing out your actors. The body double can get there early, and the body double doesn't necessarily have to be in full makeup, right? He's not, his face isn't going to be on camera, so you don't need him to, have full makeup, especially if your lead actor is like, got some heavy makeup dealy going on. He might be an alien or a superhero or whatever. Might have to have a lot of makeup on, and that can take hours to look good, depending. So a lot of these actors, they spend a ton of time in makeup. They're sitting in the chair for hours while they get layered and layered and layered. And then, meanwhile, everybody can get ready. And then as soon as that actor's ready, you can walk right on the set in full makeup, start doing the lines, boom, you shoot it. And then you move to the next setup, and that actor can go sit in nice air-conditioned trailer because you don't want the makeup to get all ruined that you just spent like 4 hours. If you spend 4 hours sitting in a chair to get alien makeup, you don't want to ruin, in 5 minutes to do one take. So, you gotta protect your talent. But anyhow, action. The reason I'm sort of diverging with action, there's not a lot to say about writing the screenplay for action. You want to be wary of too much dialogue. The action's going to speak for itself. You don't want to get too chatty because the stunts are going to be shot, and to shoot the actors talking while punching a guy, it's a problem. It makes it more difficult. Don't go crazy with the dialogue. Don't make it like a Captain America comic where your protagonist is like lecturing people as he's beating them up. That's not what people want to see, typically. Now, there may be an exception. You may have a character like that and it works fine. But I'm saying in general, if you watch, Kung Fu Hustle, right? There's dialogue and there's scenes and it's all very funny, but when it gets to the action, it's very little dialogue. Let's be honest. So your screenplay is going to reflect the lack of dialogue. So you can afford in an action screenplay to be a little more wordy about the setup, and the blocking and the fight. If you're doing something that's more dialogue driven, you would probably not get into every punch unless it was like absolutely crucial to the narrative. But in an action movie, since the action is a little more, a lot more front and center, you're going to need to get into that more than normal. More than, a fist fight between gangsters in a mafia movie doesn't have to be a big thing. Whereas in Kung Fu Hustle, there's going to be a ton of description of, how this fight plays out, and then a group of guys with axes show up, and then the fight with them, and then, the guy with the cigarette, and there's going to be a lot of description there. And again, there's just not a tremendous amount of dialogue in Kung Fu Hustle, especially during those fight scenes. But, like a comedy, the bar is a little lower for the story, which can help you because, again, you can't put in anything that's super hard to act. Your actors are only going to be so good in those action movies. You also need to come up with different action. You can't just do the same old kung fu fights. You got to do something new. One movie I thought was very interesting was this movie Hardcore Henry that came out a few years ago. It was interesting. It was a POV action movie, if you didn't see it. I don't know if it really works. After a while, it gets kind of hard to watch because it's all POV. It's like one continuous shot most of the movie. But it's interesting. You know, it's a little different. So in that respect, I liked it. Was it good overall? It was okay. I liked a lot of it. I think after seeing it, I kind of prefer a movie to be shot in sort of the quote normal way for action. I would prefer a movie like The Raid over Hardcore Henry because, you know, after a while the POV gimmick started to get tiresome. But you know, I felt they did all they could with it. I wouldn't see a sequel. I don't know what they would do in a sequel, but you know, the the uh, the action. You know, you got to come up with creative fights. That was one thing Jackie Chan always did. There were always like fun things with him where he'd hurt his hand or he'd use something unusual to fight with. So just like anything else, any other kind of genre of movie, you kind of got to do your research. So if you're setting out to write an action movie and you haven't seen too many, you better go see some action movies because you don't want to reinvent the wheel. You don't want to end up with a screenplay that, you know, the kung fu fights are just very boring, and you know, you want something unique. You know, you want something that has your style, as well as, you know, interesting martial art things, whatever genre it's in. And if it's steeped in the world of martial arts, then you got to know that world. You know, since I write a lot of comedy, most of the stuff that I've written is more like the kind of stuff Jackie Chan. The action screenplay I did wrote, I had Jackie Chan in mind for the lead because I think he's funny, and you know, so it's a kind of fun, crazy movie where the main character is fighting all these guys, and you know, it's not Shakespeare. Obviously, you know, Jackie Chan, although he was just recently in a serious movie, which I still haven't seen yet, but you know, even now, you know, personally I'd rather see him in the fun sort of comedic roles that he's always done with the crazy stunts. But you know, it was kind of cool to see him in a serious movie. I haven't seen the movie yet. I still on my list of movies to see. So just like a standard 3-act structure, boom, 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 kick up the action, have a big fight at the end, big fight. You want something major, some big revelation during the fight, and then once the fight's over, the movie's basically over. So your denouement's going to be like that, and that's it. That's why, you know, I think a lot of martial art movies, they end kind of abruptly. Because, you know, once the fighting's done, the clock is ticking. The audience is looking at their watch, ready to get up and leave the theater or change the channel. So you don't want to like have a 40-minute ending where you try to wrap everything up. You got to wrap it up in a couple of minutes. So keep that in mind. So get writing your action movie. Now, what you've been waiting for, my prediction on the Captain Marvel movie. So I want to get this on tape, so when I review the movie, I could say I'm right or I was wrong. Now, I'm keeping an open mind, and I'm basing this on a few things, but, you know, I'm a comic guy, so I kind of know that world. I think the Marvel movies really surprised me. Initially, I thought, oh, God, Disney and Marvel. I personally hate Disney for a lot of personal reasons that have nothing to do with the movies. And I did not want to like the Marvel movies, but when I saw them, I was like, wow, these are really good. I mean, they've all been pretty good. You know, the second Thor movie wasn't really good. I didn't see the whole thing, you know. And again, you know, I'm also biased against Natalie Portman because I associate with her with the bad Star Wars movies, at least initially, and now there's even worse ones. But I just never thought Natalie Portman was a good actress, and so I think that's part of the reason I don't like the second Thor movie and have no desire to see the whole thing. But other than that, I mean, I think all the Marvel movies have been solid. My favorite ones are Winter Soldier and the Civil War one. Just been great. You know, really true to the comics, at least the spirit of them. I enjoyed Thor Ragnarok. I mean, you know, for the most part, I think the Marvel movie universe has been rock solid. I was surprised by the Ant-Man movie. I couldn't believe how good that was. I still haven't seen Ant-Man and Wasp, but I'm gonna see it. You know, But that brings me to Captain Marvel. Now, here's the thing with Captain Marvel. It feels like it's being hammered into the cinematic universe. Now, part of the problem is the movie people are running out of road. And what I mean by that, they're kind of running through the Marvel characters and the major stories pretty quickly, and they're running out of good stories to even use. Now, Thanos is a pretty big character in the Marvel Universe. He's a good character to use, and the Infinity War, although it's not playing out like it did in the comics really, it is a good sort of venue for, this big fight. Mostly because the Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom have never worked out in the movies, so these are the next best guys, especially since Iron Man's so prevalent in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and Thanos was originally an Iron Man villain. The problem with Captain Marvel is they're not doing the original Captain Marvel, who was a guy. They're doing the Captain Marvel, who was the female character who was sort of retrofitted into the role in the world of comics. What had happened was the original Captain Marvel died. Carol Danvers was Ms. Marvel. She died when the X-Men or actually she wasn't an X-Men, when the character from the X-Men, Rogue, who was a villain, she could absorb people's powers. And what happened was they got into a fight, and at the time, Rogue was a villain. She was in, what the hell was it? I think the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. So Rogue touched Ms. Marvel, absorbed all her powers and memory, and Ms. Marvel plummeted to her death. And after she died, Rogue was stuck with her memories and her powers, which was why Rogue had powers and why she had the stripe in her hair, because that was from Carol Danvers. I think that was the name of the character originally, Carol. And then, or Carol may have been the new version. I don't know. But the Ms. Marvel character definitely did originally die. But then they somehow brought her back. And now they've kind of made her Captain Marvel. And look, that could be a good story. But every indication from the world of comics is the Captain Marvel character has been pretty much a failure from what I've seen. They've relaunched the book a few times. They're kind of forcing it on the fans because it's all part of this drive for diversity, diversity, diversity. Women are strong, women are strong, women are strong. Look how strong we are. Now we're going to take over the movie. Look how strong. Look, you can have strong women characters. I mean, you can have them. But to hammer this in is a bad idea because it feels very forced. Now, that being said, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is different. And the way they kind of teed this up didn't feel forced. The problem is the trailers don't look like the kind of trailers I saw in the earlier Marvel movies. Those seemed all story-driven. The Captain Marvel one didn't seem very story-driven at all. In fact, the first couple, I didn't even know what the hell was going on. And it was more about, look how cool this character is. And the number one rule in movies, as you know, screenwriters, is show, don't tell. And so telling me that Captain Marvel is an awesome character, no. No, 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 no. That's not how it works. And unfortunately, this is all part of the same company that basically ruined the Star Wars movies at this point. In my opinion, I mean, I was out of Star Wars after the Phantom Menace. I walked out of that theater. I'm like, that's it. I'm done. I never went back. So I've been out of the Star Wars universe for a while. I mean, but those last two movies they made, and I got dragged in to see Solo, which was awful, by the way. Those movies, they're really hammering you over the head with this whole diversity angle, and everybody's awesome and cool, and you gotta pay homage to these other groups of people. Like, those aren't stories. That's a political agenda. If it's part of a story, okay. I mean, there are perfectly good comic book characters and movie characters who are trans, women, they're people of color, and they're awesome. But they're that way because that's something to that adds something to the story. They don't sit around and go, how can we add women to this and make women cool? So my prediction for Captain Marvel is people won't like it. They'll tolerate it because they know Infinity War's coming up. But after Captain Marvel, the vibe is going to be, that's it. I'm going to watch Captain Marvel and then I'm out of here because now they're starting to piss me off. And the other word is that some of the major actors, at least Chris Evans, are leaving, the franchise after the second part of Infinity War. So if that's the case, if these guys start jumping ship and they got to recast people and reboot and all that kind of stuff, then they're definitely the Marvel Universe is done. The Marvel Cinematic Universe will be done. At least in the current incarnation. And I think that's a shame. They've had a great run. I think it's stupid to just force this character into the mix unless that was, part of the original plan, because, looking at the way it was mapped out for a while, it was mapped out very well and worked and integrated. Even the Spider-Man stuff got integrated very well. There seems to be no reason to go out of your way to hammer us over the head with a female character, especially since there's already female characters in the damn movie. Black Widow should have gotten her own movie. I'd have paid good money to see Scarlett Johansson for 90 minutes running around. Absolutely. And it's not just because I love her. It's also because it's a good character. She was good in a role. It was a fun character. It would have been low-key for a superhero movie. They certainly could have done a Hulk Black Widow movie. Would have been fun, too. There was a whole romance budding with those two. Would have totally seen that. And then you could have had the Hulk in there, and it could have basically been a Hulk movie with Black Widow, but who cares? They had good chemistry. Why not? They're two big names. People would have saw that movie. And there have been, I just mentioned Ant-Man and the Wasp. The Wasp is a major character in the Marvel Universe. She was in her, give her own movie. If it's so damn, gung-ho to get a female character, you've got them. Use the female characters you have. Don't go hammering in. Look, the guys at Marvel Comics right now, they have swallowed the social justice warrior Kool-Aid for a long time now and have alienated their fans. I've seen it. They are hardcore, like, you're going to like this, and if you don't, well, that's toxic masculinity. No, it's not. People don't like movies all the time, and it has nothing to do with anything other than you're preaching to them. That was the case with female Ghostbusters. That was the case with female Ocean's 11s. Let's be honest, Hollywood gets caught up in these trends, and they get all high and mighty, and when they see an avenue like, oh, if this movie doesn't sell, we can blame it on the fans? Perfect! Because there are plenty of Hollywood executives who don't want to take the blame when their movies tank. And if they can say, well, it wasn't my fault, it was these toxic men on the internet. Otherwise, it was a fine movie. Well, they're maybe going to extend their career a few more movies. So that's where that's going to come from. So I don't have high hopes for the Captain Marvel movie. I'm keeping an open mind, though. Marvel has surprised me before. And, I for a while I was saying, man, these movies are good, but how long could they keep this going? And man, they just kept going and going. They really surprised me. So I'm hopeful that this movie will surprise me and at least be decent and watchable. It doesn't help that Brie Larson's running around saying weird stuff, in my opinion, about, who shouldn't see or like this movie and why. And, apparently she said in an interview about Wrinkle in Time, which bombed at the box office, that, she didn't like to be lectured to 40-year-old men about her movies. Well, that's a newsflash, Brie, because 40-year-old men tend to make the movies. So, and I don't know who directed Wrinkle in Time, but look, there's men and women in the movie industry. And, you just kind of got to go with the flow and be positive. I mean, that's the whole point. When you're promoting a movie, there's no point in alienating anyone. No one. Everybody should want to come see your movie, and that's all you should say. This idea that you're going to get high and mighty and political and certain people, F them, no. It's already making me annoyed about going to see Captain Marvel. I already have low expectations. Now, maybe those low expectations will help me like the movie better, but quite frankly, I'm worried. So my prediction is Captain Marvel's going to be kind of watchable, but it's going to piss people off. It's going to annoy people. It's not going to do as well. It'll be the first major crack in the Marvel movie universe. It'll hopefully Brie Larson will keep her mouth shut if that happens, because if she comes out and says, well, you're a bunch of toxic males, that's not going to be good. And I think Infinity War will be solid. It'll be a nice wrap up, and I think after that, that's it. I mean, I think after that, people are going to be done. It's going to be time to move on from this trend. All the actors will bail and say, hey, had a great run, but it's time for me to do something else. And why not? I mean, they've been doing it a while, unless they're going to do a, TV series. Although I loved, Robert Downey Jr. could basically be Iron Man forever. The way they make the movies, and God knows he's awesome in the role. So, chin up, screenwriters. That's it. I'm sorry for the long ramble. We'll see you next time on Screenwriting Tips. Bye-bye.